The SOS signal on a quiet, distant alien planet. The sky was filled with the sound of explosions. The once peaceful world was now at war. The alien forces, strong and advanced, were being crushed by an enemy they never expected. Desperate, the planet's leaders realized they had no choice but to call for help. It was their last chance to survive. The alien capital city was a mess of burning buildings and shattered streets. The enemy had already taken control of most of the planet, leaving only a small group of resistance fighters holding out in the last stronghold. The leader of the resistance, an alien commander named Terran, knew they could not hold out much longer. "Send the signal," Terran ordered his communications officer. The officer, an alien with sharp silver skin, nodded and quickly set to work. The communication system hummed as the message was sent out. It was a cry for help, a desperate call to any nearby civilization that might come to their aid. The SOS signal flashed into the vastness of space, traveling across light years of emptiness. The alien race had no idea who would receive it, but they were hoping for a miracle. They needed help, and fast. Far across the galaxy, on a planet called Earth, life was much different. Humans went about their daily routines, unaware of the galaxy's struggles. But that was about to change. The Earth military, a powerful force of soldiers and ships, was always on standby. Their reputation had spread across the stars. The humans were known as Deathworlders, a species from a planet full of dangerous creatures where survival was a constant battle. The Earth's military commanders had been monitoring space for years, ever since they first learned that they were not alone. In the universe, they had a special unit that was always prepared for emergencies. This unit was known as the Deathworld Fleet. And when the SOS signal arrived, they were the first to respond. In a massive underground base, the Earth Fleet's command center lit up with alerts. A red light flashed on the screen, indicating that an emergency message had been received. The head of the command center, General Harlan, stood up quickly, his eyes scanning the screen. "Sir, we've got a transmission," said Lieutenant Barnes, a young officer with short, dark hair. He had been working long shifts, but his voice was steady as he spoke. General Harlan turned to the lieutenant. "Is it an alien SOS?" he asked. The two officers exchanged a quick glance. "Yes, sir," Barnes replied. "It's a distress signal from an alien planet." Harlan didn't waste any time. He grabbed a communicator and pressed it to his ear. "Get me the fleet commander now," he ordered. Within moments, the fleet commander appeared on the screen. Captain Hayes was a seasoned leader, known for her calm demeanor and tactical brilliance. She was often the one called upon to lead the Deathworld fleet into the most dangerous missions. "Captain, we've received a distress signal from an alien world," General Harlan said, his voice firm. "We're sending the Deathworld fleet in. Prepare the fleet for deployment." Captain Hayes nodded, her expression serious. "Understood, sir. We're ready to move out." Harlan could see the professionalism in her eyes. He trusted her completely. "Good. We leave in 20 minutes. I want you to lead this operation personally. Find out what's going on, and if we can help, we do so with full force." The command center quickly went into overdrive as the Earth military prepared the fleet for deployment. Thousands of human soldiers and officers moved with precision, their actions synchronized like clockwork. The Deathworld fleet was a well-oiled machine ready for anything. Back on the alien planet, Terran and his team had no idea what was coming. The Resistance had just begun to set up their last line of defense when they received a new communication. This one was not a message of distress. It was a response to their SOS. Terran rushed to the communication center where the officer handed him a blinking device. The screen flickered and then showed a series of images. Terran stared in disbelief. The message was simple, but it was unlike anything he had ever seen before. The message displayed a fleet of massive ships, all flying in perfect formation. Each one of them was enormous, more powerful than anything the alien race had ever seen, and they were coming toward them. The message ended with a single line. "We are the Deathworld fleet. Help is on the way." Terran stood frozen for a moment, trying to understand what he had just seen. Who were these humans? What kind of force was this? He had heard rumors of Earth's reputation, but he never thought they would actually come to their aid. The aliens had always viewed themselves as the top of the food chain. They had powerful weapons and advanced technology, but now they were about to see something that would change everything. The humans were coming, and their fleet was unlike anything the aliens had ever faced. Back in the human command center, Captain Hayes was giving the final orders to her crew. The Deathworld fleet, a force built to respond to any galactic threat, was about to enter a new battle. They had never faced the unknown in quite this way before, but they were ready. The fleet's ships were prepared for war, each one armed, with the latest technology and trained for the worst. As the fleet's ships jumped into hyperspace, General Harlan watched them disappear into the stars. He knew that the humans were more than capable of handling anything the galaxy threw at them. But there was something different about this mission. The aliens, whoever they were, had reached out to them for help, and that made all the difference. Next few hours would decide the fate of an entire planet. The stage was set. The Deathworld fleet was on its way to the alien world. They had no idea what to expect, but one thing was certain. Nothing in this galaxy would stop them. The humans had arrived, and they would show the galaxy what it meant to be unstoppable. The aliens would soon learn that the humans did not just fight to survive. They fought to win. Arrival of the human fleet, the skies above the alien planet, were still filled with the sounds of explosions, but the cries of desperation were slowly being replaced by an eerie silence. The enemy forces, having pushed the planet's defenders to the brink of annihilation, were pausing to regroup. It was then that the signal came through. An alien fleet had just appeared on the edge of their system, but this fleet was unlike any other they had seen before. It was human. The enemy commanders, already wary of the Earth's reputation, stood frozen in disbelief as their sensors tracked the incoming ships. These ships didn't look like any standard alien fleet. They were massive, dark, and imposing. And as they got closer, the unknown strength of the humans began to reveal itself. It was clear to the enemy that these humans didn't just have numbers on their side. They had something else. Something they couldn't quite understand. On the alien planet's surface, Terran, the resistance leader, stood watching the sky. He had no idea what kind of warriors the humans were, but their arrival filled him with a mix of awe and uncertainty. He had never seen a fleet like this before. The ships were dark and sleek, cutting through the atmosphere like a blade slicing through the air. They were unlike anything the Resistance had ever used or seen in their decades of war. "The fleet is coming in fast," Terran whispered, his voice tight with tension. He turned to his officers, who were just as stunned. "What kind of fleet is this? What are these humans?" But before anyone could answer, the sound of something monstrous, something that could not be mistaken for anything but power, cut through the air. The engines of the fleet roared as they cut through the atmosphere, with terrifying precision. The fleet's ships were already descending, dropping in a perfect formation, their movements fluid and deadly. Far above in space, Captain Hayes stood aboard her flagship, the Vanguard, staring out at the alien planet below. The human fleet had entered the atmosphere with no hesitation, and her heart beat in perfect rhythm with the operations unfolding beneath her command. She was used to the calm before a storm, but this was different. The stakes were higher than ever. "Status report," she barked, her voice sharp but steady. Lieutenant Walker, the communications officer, immediately relayed the information. "We're entering the planet's orbit. All ships are on course and on schedule, Captain. No interference so far." Hayes nodded, her mind racing with calculations. The alien forces were outnumbered, but the humans didn't rely on numbers alone. Their tactics were ruthless, their ships built for speed, stealth, and devastating firepower. The Deathworld fleet didn't just arrive to fight, they arrived to dominate. Her fingers ran across the holographic controls in front of her, sending out a fleet-wide transmission. "This is Captain Hayes. Prepare for immediate engagement. We are here to assist, not to negotiate. Do not underestimate the enemy, but do not hesitate. We strike first, strike hard." Back on the planet's surface, Terran's eyes were locked on the horizon, his hands clenched into fists. The alien ships had already begun their descent, breaking through the cloud layers and coming to a slow hover just above the battlefield. They were intimidating. They were massive, and their guns were already charged. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath his feet as one of the human ships touched down with an explosion of dust and debris. The ship, sleek and dark, almost seemed to absorb the light around it, as if it were a living shadow. The atmosphere around it seemed charged, electric with the promise of violence. As the dust cleared, Terran could see the human soldiers marching forward. They were organized, calm, and completely unfazed by the destruction around them. They wore advanced armor that gleamed under the alien sun. Their guns were drawn, but there was no panic in their movements, only precision. "Ready yourself," Terran muttered to his officers, even though they were already preparing for battle. But he knew deep down that the humans were different. They weren't just here to fight, they were here to change everything. Up in the skies above, the enemy's commanders had begun to organize their own forces, attempting to regroup and retaliate against the human fleet. But the humans were already one step ahead. Before they could even mobilize, a sharp blast ripped through the enemy lines, shattering the formation like glass. The humans had fired first. "Open fire," one of the alien commanders yelled, but it was already too late. The human fleet had already struck with devastating force. The enemy ships exploded in a shower of flames and debris. There was no hesitation, no warning, just the cold precision of the Deathworld fleet as they tore through the sky with laser-focused intent. On the ground, the resistance fighters could hardly believe what they were witnessing. The enemy had been pushed back, but the humans weren't stopping. They were relentless, tearing through the alien forces with ease. One human soldier could take on dozens of the alien warriors without breaking a sweat. Terran watched in disbelief as a group of humans cut through a small battalion of alien soldiers, barely breaking their stride. They moved as though they had been trained for this moment, like they had been born for war. "This is impossible," Terran murmured, unable to tear his eyes away from the carnage unfolding before him. The alien soldiers were falling back, retreating in complete panic. The humans weren't just winning, they were decimating them. The human soldiers weren't even fighting with the chaos the aliens had expected. They were moving with deadly precision, almost as if they were performing a well-rehearsed dance. Every strike, every move, every shot was perfectly calculated. They didn't flinch, they didn't hesitate. And then, the most terrifying thing of all happened. The human fleet sent in their most elite forces, soldiers who were not just trained in combat but were practically unstoppable. The humans had advanced technology, but what really scared Terran was their unpredictability. The humans seemed to understand the chaos of war better than anyone, and that made them more dangerous than any alien force he had ever faced. Just when it seemed like the battle was won, an even more shocking development occurred. Out of nowhere, the lead human ship, the Vanguard, fired a single blinding shot into the sky, piercing the heart of the enemy's command ship. The enemy commander's ship exploded into a fiery ball of destruction, leaving nothing but debris behind. The alien forces were now in full retreat. The humans had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. As Terran watched the last of the alien forces retreat into the distance, he realized something that shook him to his core. The humans weren't just here to help. They were here to conquer, and this was only the beginning. The price of victory. The battle was over. The enemy forces had been pushed into retreat, and the skies were eerily quiet. The Deathworld fleet had arrived like a storm, their ships cutting through the atmosphere and tearing the enemy apart with surgical precision. But as the smoke began to clear, an unsettling silence hung in the air, one that felt more ominous than the chaos of battle. On the planet's surface, Terran stood among his remaining resistance fighters, watching the horizon. His mind raced as he processed what had just happened. The humans had saved them. They had annihilated the enemy, but at what cost? The humans didn't just fight for survival, they fought for something far greater. And in the aftermath, their victory felt hollow, like something was about to shift in ways they couldn't predict. As Terran watched, a sleek, dark human transport ship landed not far from their position. The sound of its engines slowly died down, leaving only the whispers of the wind. Moments later, the hatch opened with a loud hiss. Out of the ship stepped a human commander, flanked by a small but intimidating group of soldiers. Terran's eyes narrowed. This was Captain Hayes, the leader of the Deathworld fleet. He had heard stories about her, stories that made his skin crawl. She was known for her cold, efficient leadership and her willingness to do whatever it took to achieve her mission. There was no mercy in her eyes, no sympathy in her heart. The humans didn't seem to know the meaning of the word. Captain, Hayes walked towards Terran with deliberate steps, her expression unreadable. Her soldiers fell into line behind her, their movements synchronized, their faces as emotionless as their leaders. Terran didn't know what to expect from her, but he knew one thing. This wouldn't be a simple thank you for their help. The humans never acted without reason. "You are the leader of the resistance," Captain Hayes said, her voice calm but firm. "Terran, was it?" Terran nodded, his jaw tightening. "Yes, Captain, you saved us. You destroyed the enemy." "Destroyed them?" Hayes repeated, her eyes flicking to the horizon where the last remnants of the alien forces had retreated. "No, we didn't destroy them. We eliminated the threat. And now you owe us a debt." Terran's eyes widened at her words. "Debt? We owe you a debt? For saving us?" A slow, cold smile curled on Captain Hayes's lips. "You misunderstand. You owe us because we have just secured this planet for you. But nothing comes free, not even your survival." Terran's heart skipped a beat. He had thought the humans were here to help, to end the war. But now he understood. They weren't just here to win. They were here for something much more significant. "Explain," Terran demanded, his voice hardening. "What do you want from us?" "Control," Captain Hayes answered simply. "We are the Deathworld fleet. We do not engage without a purpose. You have been under siege for too long. Your planet, your people, and your resources are now under our protection. But it's not just protection we offer. You will follow the terms of our agreement." Terran was silent for a long moment, processing her words. "You're taking control of our world?" Hayes didn't flinch. "Taking control? No. We're giving you the opportunity to survive. We don't need your resources. We don't need your planet. But we do need cooperation. We need to know that when we leave, your people will be aligned with our goals. That you won't turn against us when the war is over." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. Terran had thought the humans were here to help, to fight the war and leave. But this was something else. The humans weren't just allies. They were a force of nature, a force that would bend the galaxy to their will. "But why us?" Terran asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Why help us if you don't need anything from us?" Captain Hayes's eyes flashed with something unreadable. "Because the galaxy will be different after this war. We are paving the way for a new order. You'll either stand with us, or you'll fall. There's no middle ground." The realization hit Terran like a cold wave. The humans weren't just a superior force in battle. They were laying the groundwork for something far more profound, something that would change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. "We will comply with your terms," Terran said, his voice a mix of anger and acceptance. He didn't have a choice. He was a soldier. He knew when to fight and when to stand down. But that didn't mean he had to like it. "But don't expect us to welcome you as rulers." A brief, almost imperceptible smile appeared on Captain Hayes's face. "Good. I didn't expect gratitude. I expect obedience. And you'll find that cooperation with us is far more profitable than resistance." Terran didn't respond. He knew he was being played, but there was nothing he could do. The humans had saved them, yes. But they had also made it clear that their help came at a price that would not just cost them their independence, but reshape the future of their world. Far above the planet, the Deathworld fleet loomed ominously, The dark ships remained, in orbit, their engines humming with barely contained power. The fleet's presence was an undeniable force, a reminder to the entire galaxy that humanity had arrived, not as conquerors, but as architects of a new era. Inside the flagship Vanguard, Captain Hayes sat at her command table, looking down at the planetary map. Her fingers traced the coordinates, calculating the next move. She had known from the beginning that the fate of this planet was only the beginning. The humans were no longer just a species fighting for survival. They had become something much more dangerous, a species that would reshape the galaxy in their image. The war was far from over, but the Deathworld fleet had already begun to leave their mark. As Terran watched the human fleet above him, he knew that this battle was only the first of many. The humans had arrived like a storm, sweeping through everything in their path. But the price of their victory had just been made clear, and it was far steeper than he had ever imagined. He had fought for survival, but now his people were fighting for something much bigger. The humans were in control, and there was no turning back. The hidden agenda. The days after the battle passed in a haze of uncertainty. The air was thick with tension, and the once defiant resistance forces had been subdued into uneasy cooperation. Terran, now struggling with the weight of the humans' demands, couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was unfolding behind Captain Hayes's cold, calculating eyes. The Deathworld fleet had set up a command center on the planet. There, technology and soldiers everywhere, overseeing the rebuilding of infrastructure, maintaining order, and, most importantly, ensuring that the locals adhered to their new arrangement. But while they had promised protection, Terran couldn't escape the question burning in his mind. What were they really after? He found himself sneaking into the heart of the human camp one evening, under the cover of darkness. The soldiers, although unflinching in their loyalty to Hayes, seemed almost too quiet, too methodical. Terran's instincts told him something was off, but every time he tried to voice his suspicions, the humans would offer calm reassurances, or worse, deflect the question altogether. He was determined to find the truth as he snuck through the dense woods surrounding the human encampment. Terran's senses were on high alert. Every rustling leaf, every footstep on the ground felt like a threat. The humans were everywhere, watching from the shadows. He couldn't escape the feeling that his every move was being tracked. Finally, he reached the heart of their base, an imposing structure made of sleek, metallic surfaces and glowing lights. It was both beautiful and intimidating. From the outside, it seemed like a mere command post, but Terran knew better. This was where the real decisions were being made, where the fate of his people was being shaped. Terran approached the entrance cautiously, sticking to the shadows. He had no idea what to expect inside, but he wasn't going to stop until he uncovered the truth. As he crept closer, he spotted a guard at the entrance, a human soldier standing tall with his weapon drawn. Terran's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't afford to be caught. Not now. Not when he was so close. He waited for the guard to look away, and when he did, Terran darted inside the building, barely making a sound. His eyes quickly adjusted to the dimly lit corridors, and he moved swiftly, staying close to the walls, avoiding the watchful eyes of the human soldiers. He passed several rooms, each one filled with monitors and equipment he couldn't recognize. But it was the low murmurs of conversation coming from one room that caught his attention. He paused, listening intently. "It's ready," a voice said, the tone clipped and matter-of-fact. "Everything is in place." "Good," another voice replied, this one colder, more authoritative. "The final phase of the operation can begin. Once it's done, the galaxy will know that humanity is no longer a force to be reckoned with. It will be a force they must obey." Terran's blood ran cold as he heard the words. Final phase of the operation? He had no idea what they were planning, but it was clear that the humans were not just here to help. They were orchestrating something far larger, and he was certain it wasn't in his people's best interests. He pressed his ear to the door, desperate to hear more. "Are we certain about the results?" the first voice asked. "We've run simulations," came the reply. The plan is flawless. Once the humans have control of this sector, the rest of the galaxy will fall in line, and we'll be ready to take on whatever else comes next. Terran's head spun. This wasn't just about saving a planet. This was about domination. The second voice, one that Terran now recognized as Captain Hayes, spoke with an icy calmness. There can be no mistakes. Once the fleet is deployed to the next system, we will show the galaxy that resistance is futile. The Deathworld fleet will rule. It's time to make an example of this world. Terran's stomach twisted with dread. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The humans weren't here to be allies to help his people win freedom. They were here to expand their empire, to crush any who stood in their way. As the conversation continued, Terran's mind raced. The final phase they were speaking of, he had to stop it. Whatever it was, it would mark the end of any hope for independence, not just for his people, but for anyone who stood against the humans. They had already shown their strength. But now, he realized they were preparing to show something much darker, something that could wipe out entire civilizations with a single command. Terran couldn't let that happen, but he needed proof, something that could rally others to his side. The humans couldn't just wipe out their enemies. They were going to wipe out entire star systems, and in the process, destroy everything they had fought for. He moved quickly, looking for any documents or evidence of this final phase. He reached a console near the back of the room, its screen displaying complex data. A series of cryptic codes flashed across the screen, but there was one thing that caught Terran's eye. A sequence of coordinates, each one marked with a symbol he didn't recognize. A map of sorts, outlining the next few target systems. Terran's heart raced as he memorized the details. The coordinates were to systems far beyond their own, places he had never even heard of. The humans weren't just planning on taking control of this planet. They had bigger ambitions. They were about to send out their fleet to enforce their rule across multiple systems. He backed away from the console slowly, the weight of what he had learned settling heavily on his shoulders. He couldn't let this go. He couldn't just let the humans sweep through the galaxy, conquering world after world without anyone knowing the true cost. As he turned to leave, a sharp sound broke the silence. The door behind him slid open and the voice of a soldier rang out. "What are you doing here?" Terran didn't have time to think. His survival instincts kicked in, and he bolted from the room, his heart pounding in his chest. The alarm blared, echoing through the hallways. The humans were onto him, but Terran was determined. He had the proof now, and he would make sure the galaxy knew what was coming before it was too late. The Alliance of Shadows, the chase had begun. Terran's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted through the dark corridors of the human command center. The echoing footsteps of the soldiers behind him grew louder with every second. The hum of their technology was no longer just background noise. It was a constant reminder that he was up against a force far beyond anything his people had ever imagined. His breath came in sharp gasps, his mind working faster than his legs could carry. He had no plan, no clear path to safety, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not after what he'd learned. The final phase, the deployment of the Deathworld fleet, and their planned domination of the galaxy, had to be stopped. He didn't know how, but he was sure of one thing. He could not let the humans go unchecked. As he rounded a corner, he stumbled, nearly colliding with a pair of human soldiers who had just entered the hallway. The soldiers didn't flinch, they didn't hesitate. But as Terran prepared himself for a fight, the unexpected happened. The soldiers stepped aside, allowing him to pass. One of them spoke, his voice cold but somehow familiar. "Go. We're not here to stop you. Not yet." Terran's mind raced. He barely had time to process the strange moment before he continued running, unsure of what was happening. Were these soldiers allies? Were they part of a larger rebellion? Or was it another trap set by Captain Hayes? The shadows of the hallways seemed to stretch endlessly as Terran pushed himself harder, his feet barely making a sound against the cold floor. He needed answers, and fast. He couldn't risk getting caught now. If Hayes found out what he had uncovered, there would be no stopping her. As he neared the exit, something flickered at the corner of his eye. Another soldier. But this one wasn't like the others. This one was dressed differently, in a darker, more tactical uniform, and she was standing alone, her back to him. Terran's instinct screamed at him to turn around and run, but something about her seemed different. Without thinking, he approached her cautiously, keeping his steps light. As he drew closer, he saw her turn, her expression unreadable. "You're in over your head," she said, her voice low, almost whispering. "But you're not alone." Terran stopped dead in his tracks. "Who are you?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced around the hallway, checking to see if anyone was near. Satisfied, she finally spoke again. "Someone who knows what's coming, and someone who can help you stop it." Terran narrowed his eyes. "Why would you help me? You're human. You're part of this conquest." The woman's lips twitched into a small, bitter smile. "I'm part of something much bigger than you think, and so are you." Confused, Terran stepped closer. "What do you mean?" The woman motioned for him to follow her, and without waiting for a response, she turned and walked down the hallway at a brisk pace. Terran hesitated for only a moment before following. He didn't know whether to trust her, but he had no other choice. If there was even a chance she could help, he had to take it. They reached a small hidden door at the far end of the hall, tucked away behind a stack of crates. The woman quickly entered a code on a keypad, and the door slid open with a faint hiss. As Terran stepped inside, he was hit by a wave of heat, much warmer than the sterile coldness of the rest of the base. Inside, the space was dimly lit and filled with a strange mixture of technology and salvaged materials. The walls were lined with monitors showing data streams, maps, and encrypted communications. It was nothing like the rest of the human base. It felt more personal, more secretive. The woman turned to him, her expression serious. "We've been waiting for someone like you, someone who could help us bring the truth to light." Terran's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. "Who are you, and what do you mean by the truth?" She took a deep breath before answering. "I'm part of a faction within the human military. We don't agree with what Hayes and her fleet are doing. We don't want to conquer worlds or destroy civilizations. We just want to survive, to protect our people. But the ones in charge, the ones like Hayes, they have different goals, and it's time someone stopped them." Terran felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. A faction within the human military that was fighting against the very empire that had saved his planet? It didn't seem possible. But the more he listened to the woman, the more it made sense. He had seen the way Captain Hayes spoke, the coldness in her eyes. She didn't care about saving anyone, she cared about control. "We've been tracking the Deathworld fleet for months," the woman continued. "We've discovered what they're really after. The final phase isn't just about controlling this planet. They plan to activate a weapon, one that can decimate entire solar systems with a single command. A weapon that was buried in ancient technology that the humans have been searching for." Terran felt a chill run down his spine. A weapon. They're planning to use it, aren't they? "They're planning to wipe out entire worlds," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "And they're not stopping here." The woman nodded grimly. "Exactly. And they'll do it unless we stop them. We have to work quickly. Hayes has already activated the first phase of the weapon. She's just waiting for the go-ahead to launch it." Terran's mind raced as he processed the gravity of the situation. The humans weren't just conquering, they were preparing for genocide on a galactic scale. "How do we stop them?" Terran demanded. "What can we do?" The woman looked at him, with a mix of hope and resignation. "You're the key. You're the one who can get to the heart of their operation. You know the truth, you've seen their plans. We need to expose them to the galaxy before it's too late." Terran knew what he had to do. The humans had underestimated him. They had thought they were the ones pulling the strings. But now he had the power to change everything. He wasn't going to let them destroy everything he fought for, everything his people had fought for. With newfound determination, Terran nodded. "Then let's expose them. Together." The woman's expression softened, and for the first time there was a flicker of something resembling hope in her eyes. We're not alone in this. There are others who will help. But we have to move fast. Time is running out. Terran understood. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything he had imagined. The battle for his planet was no longer about freedom. It was about stopping a force capable of ending entire civilizations. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the entire galaxy. The hidden weapon Terran barely had time to think before the chaos unfolded. The human faction had a plan, he knew that much. But the stakes were far higher than he had imagined. The weapon Hayes had activated was not just a military tool. It was something far worse. Something that could tear through the galaxy and leave nothing but ashes in its wake. And Terran, the reluctant hero, was the only one who knew how to stop it. The woman who had helped him, whose name was Mara, stood beside him now in the heart of their secret base. Her eyes, once filled with doubt, were now alive with a kind of fierce determination he had never seen before. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for everything. "We're going in," Mara said, her voice tight, with resolve. "We can't afford to wait any longer." Terran looked around at the group of humans who had gathered in the dimly lit room. Most of them were soldiers, their faces hard and battle-worn, but there were also scientists and technicians, people who had once been a part of Hayes's operation, people who had seen the horrors firsthand and had chosen to rebel. They were all counting on him now. "Where are we going?" Terran asked. His mind was racing, trying to piece together everything he had learned in such a short time. Mara gave him a grim look. "We need to get to the control center. That's where the weapon is being activated. If we don't shut it down there, it'll be too late." Terran nodded. He felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. The control center was located deep within the heart of Hayes's fleet, a place so heavily guarded that most people wouldn't even dream of trying to infiltrate it. But Mara and her team had a plan, and more importantly, they had a chance. As they prepared to leave the hidden base, Terran's mind kept racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Hayes had known he was onto her. She had seen the fear in his eyes when he had learned about the weapon, and now he was walking straight into her lair. He knew that this was where everything would come to a head. The final confrontation. The end of the line. Hours passed in tense silence as they made their way through the corridors of the human ship. Mara led the way, her quick steps a stark contrast to the heavy, dragging pace of Terran's thoughts. His eyes flicked back and forth, taking in every detail, every shadow that might conceal an enemy. They reached the docking bay where a small, fast transport ship waited for them. Its sleek design promised speed, and Terran knew they would need every ounce of it. As they boarded, Mara gave him a quick nod. "Ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the danger that lay ahead. Terran didn't hesitate. "Let's do this." As the transport ship shot out of the hidden bay and into the depths of space, Terran felt his stomach twist with unease. The Deathworld fleet loomed in the distance, its massive warships forming a blockade that seemed impenetrable. Hayes had made sure her forces were ready for any intrusion, but that didn't matter, not anymore. The weapon had to be stopped. As the ship flew closer to the fleet's perimeter, Terran's heart rate quickened. The sensors on board were beginning to light up, signaling that they were being detected. He could almost feel the hum of the human, war machines as they closed in on their position. Time was running out. They had to act fast. Terran glanced at Mara, whose face was a mask of calm determination. "How long until we reach the control center?" "Not long," Mara replied, her voice clipped. "We'll be there in 10 minutes. After that, we'll need to split up. I'll go for the weapons control panel, but I'll need you to create a distraction. We can't let Hayes stop us." Terran nodded, swallowing hard. "And if we fail?" Mara didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, her eyes soft, but filled with something he couldn't quite place. It was a look of understanding, of shared fate. "Then the galaxy falls," she said quietly. "But we're not going to fail." Terran wasn't sure if that was meant to reassure him or remind him of the consequences. But it didn't matter. The moment they reached the control center, everything would change, and nothing would ever be the same. The transport ship finally docked on one of the smaller, less monitored ships in the fleet. Terran's pulse pounded in his ears as he slipped into the shadows with Mara and the rest of her crew. The plan was simple: get in, disable the weapon, and get out. But nothing ever went as planned when the fate of the galaxy was on the line. As they moved stealthily through the ship's darkened halls, Terran couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every turn, every corner seemed to hold a new threat, and the deeper they went, the closer they came to the weapon's core. They reached the control center just as the alarms began blaring, an unmistakable sign that their presence had been detected. Terran's heart slammed against his ribs as he broke into a run, his breath coming faster now, his instincts screaming at him to go faster, faster, faster. "We're almost there," Mara shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. The control center door slid open in front of them, and what they saw took Terran's breath away. The weapon was a massive, pulsating core of energy, surrounded by rows of intricate machinery. Terran could feel the raw power radiating from it, the hum in the air vibrating through his bones. But it wasn't just the weapon that caught his attention. It was the shadow standing in front of it. Captain Hayes. Her eyes met Terran's, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The woman who had once seemed untouchable, unstoppable, now stood before him, her face cold, her stance confident. "You think you can stop me?" Hayes sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "This galaxy is mine, and nothing you do will change that." Terran felt a surge of defiance rise in his chest. "We'll see about that." The room erupted into chaos as the alarms blared louder, and Hayes signaled her soldiers to attack. But Terran was already moving. It was time to finish this. The final stand, the control center erupted into chaos as Terran and Mara fought side by side, their movements fluid, desperate, yet full of determination. Hayes's soldiers charged at them with deadly intent, weapons raised, but Terran's mind was laser-focused. He wasn't thinking about the soldiers around him, or the danger of being overwhelmed. His eyes were locked on one thing. Hayes, she, was the source of everything. She was the one who had set this catastrophe in motion, and now she would pay. Mara, with a swift movement, sent one of the soldiers crashing to the floor with a well-placed strike. Terran swung his arm, deflecting. Another blast from a soldier's gun. But there was no time to waste. They needed to reach the weapon and they needed to stop it, or else the galaxy would fall into darkness. Hayes laughed, her voice echoing off the walls of the control center. "You're too late," she taunted, her eyes gleaming with twisted satisfaction. "I already activated the core. It's unstoppable now. There's no way to shut it down." "Nothing you do will change that." Terran's heart sank for a split second, but then his resolve hardened. He had to believe there was a way. They had come too far. Mara had risked everything to bring him here. He wouldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. "We'll see about that," Terran muttered, gritting his teeth. With a surge of adrenaline, he dove toward the central console, where the weapon's activation controls flickered with dangerous energy. He could feel the pulse of the weapon growing stronger, more insistent. The air felt thick with the hum of impending destruction. Every second counted now. Mara fought her way toward Hayes, slashing through enemy soldiers like a whirlwind of fury. But Hayes was already moving too. She was fast, her eyes constantly shifting, calculating. She was trying to outsmart them. "You think I didn't plan for this?" Hayes called, her voice dripping with scorn. "You'll never make it in time." But Terran wasn't listening. His fingers flew across the controls, trying to decipher the complicated sequence to deactivate the core. Sweat dripped down his face, his heart racing as the countdown began. 60 seconds, 59 seconds, 58 seconds. He didn't have much time. Hayes sneered as she turned toward him. "You're nothing but a distraction, a little pawn in a much larger game. You can't stop me. You've lost before you even began." Terran's mind raced. Her words stung, but he didn't let them break him. He focused, searching for the one flaw in the system she had overlooked. There had to be a way to stop it. There had to be. Mara's voice echoed behind him, full of urgency. "Terran, you need to hurry. We're running out of time." Terran's fingers hovered over the controls. He had to take a risk. His gut told him. This was the moment to trust everything he had learned in the past days. Everything Mara had taught him about strategy, about precision. He tapped a sequence of buttons, faster than before, his pulse pounding in his ears. There it was. The core flickered. The pulse of energy momentarily wavered. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Hayes saw the shift. She moved toward Terran in an instant, faster than he expected. "You think you've won?" she snarled, aiming a blaster at his head. "You'll never make it out of here alive." Terran turned just in time to see the blaster in her hand. His body moved on instinct, twisting out of the way, narrowly avoiding the blast. But he didn't need to focus on her anymore. He didn't need to fight her. He had one mission: stop the weapon. With one final desperate push, he entered the final command. The room went deathly silent for a heartbeat. And then, a deafening roar filled the control center as the weapon's pulse flickered again. The air seemed to ripple with the force of it. Hayes let out a strangled scream of fury as her perfect plan unraveled. The lights in the room flickered, and the weapon's energy began to destabilize, spiraling out of control. "No!" Hayes screamed, rushing toward the core, but it was too late. Terran had done it. He had stopped the countdown. But the victory was short-lived. The whole ship shook as a massive explosion ripped through the walls. The force of the blast sent Terran crashing to the ground. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he thought he had failed. But as he struggled to his feet, he saw Mara beside him, her face set with determination. "We have to go. Now," she shouted, pulling him toward the exit. The explosion had created a chain reaction, and the entire control center was collapsing. The walls cracked and debris fell from the ceiling, but there was no time to think. No time to question if they had done enough. They had to escape. Terran's mind was a blur of adrenaline as they raced down the crumbling corridors of the ship, the sound of the collapsing structure echoing in their ears. The crew was already evacuating, their footsteps frantic. The ship was falling apart around them, and it was clear that they had only moments before it was too late to escape. "Is it over?" Terran asked, breathless, as he and Mara stumbled into the escape pod bay. Mara's face was pale, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "It's over," she said, her voice barely audible. "We stopped the weapon. The galaxy is safe." As they climbed into the escape pod, Terran glanced back at the wreckage, knowing that this battle was only one of many. But for the first time since he had stepped into this war, he felt something he hadn't expected: hope. The pod shot off into space, carrying them away from the devastation they had left behind. But as they looked out at the vast, dark void of space, Terran knew that the fight was far from over. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning.